folks. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Laws podcast with East Forest. I'm East Forest. This week, we're bringing you a conversation with Sheela Bringi. She played the bansuri flute on the track Mind Karma on the Ram Dass Chapter 1 that was recently released. And Sheela's someone that I've known for several years. We crossed paths out there in the world touring. And she's an incredible musician and has all sorts of other information and knowledge, and we just got to have a really good time digging deep into her process and what it's like to make music and this subject of music in general, get a little bit into the weeds with that, which I love. And so I think you'll find this interesting too, and really just trying to give you a behind-the-scenes look into how some of these tracks were put together for the East Forest Ram Dass project. And Mind Karma, last week we got a bit into Trevor Hall and his process with this same track, so I thought this would be fitting to have Sheela chime in too. And I want to do this with some of the other tracks as well, and maybe in different ways, but something we'll try to put together in the coming weeks. But thank you to everyone who has been listening to the release since it came out, and particularly those of you who have shared that online and shared your experience so that other people will know about it and can dive into this. Because really that's what we're doing, right? We're having our own felt experience and having the courage to be vulnerable enough to express how that resonates in us, because more than likely, and this is something I've always found with myself, if it's resonating with you, it's probably going to resonate with somebody else in the same way, unique to them, but there's a universal sense of experience. And this kind of sharing helps us feel not alone. It helps us remember that we're having a shared experience and that we are connected and that we are in this human experiment together. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for diving in with your hearts and for sharing that stuff online. And you can always reach out at info@eastforest.org, and that's your way of just saying hello or asking questions or comments and so forth to this podcast. I'll be out on the road in the coming weeks and months, and we've been adding lots of new things, so you can always check that out at eastforest.org. I'll be around the country, and like I said, that's changing all the time and adding things in there. Been doing some interesting ceremony concerts coming up, which I'm always excited to continue to explore that methodology, and I'm really looking forward to weaving in some of this Ram Dass material into that. But it has been a joy to finally get this Ram Dass East Forest material out there and to watch the reverberations happen. The event we had in Boise was absolutely lovely, and I'm just really excited to continue this whole process together. Okay, so let's get into this conversation. This is Sheela Bringi. Here we go.
Our karma is our mind.
Sheela Bringi, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Where are
you? Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, how's the weather?
It's not bad. We had a few really big storms, some of the coldest weather I've ever experienced here, but...
Really? Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and I grew up here.
Oh.
So...
Well, I do want to ask you some questions about your background, because it's good for me because I don't know. I just know like the broad strokes about you, but I've never actually asked you or gotten the details about how you got to be where you are. But I wanted to bring you on because you played on Mind Karma, the song with the Ram Dass East Forest track, and Trevor Hall's on that track, and so are you playing the bansuri flute. And so I did want to ask you about your process with that. I think to me that's always interesting to sort of like what it was like, because I wasn't there when you recorded it. And I think it's sort of interesting for people to get a little bit behind the song and uncover the mystery of how we get from nothing to something.
Yeah.
And so I'll ask you about that first before we get into your other stuff. So when I did reach out, And it's funny you did the flute because I think I was saying maybe do some harp or even maybe anything. But what led you to say, oh, this is a flute thing, I'm going to do flute on this?
I think because I felt like the timbre of the flute and the kind of the breathiness and the sort of the wood tone would work well with it.
Yeah.
I feel like with the harp, the way I play harp can sometimes be like kind of percussive, and it has a lot of notes in it and stuff. And so you already had a lot of those elements in the track. And so I thought that the flute would be nice as kind of like floating on top.
It's totally perfect. It's just, I don't know. For some reason, I didn't know. Harp to me is an instrument. I actually play it on my Nord. Like I have a Mellotron harp sample. So I actually like play harp sounds in my live stuff a lot. And so it's something that's, I just love it. But it's really hard to find people who play real harp and play it well. So I'm always just sort of eager. I think I've been bugging you to like do something on harp for a while.
Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah. What would you say your predilection is for harp though? Like the styles that you feel the most comfortable in or the strongest in?
Well, excuse me. My journey with the harp was kind of interesting, actually. The reason that I play it is because it was gifted to me when I was about 14. And I never had any
actual instrument. Someone gave you one.
Yeah, I never had any thoughts of playing it before. But we have close family friends who became my godparents, and she played the harp. I went to visit her one summer, and I played the piano. And so I sat down at her harp, and I started just like playing some melodies. And she felt like I had a real talent for it, so she decided to gift me her first harp. And so,
was it a big one?
No, it's like 33 strings. It's a folk harp, a beautiful wooden folk harp. And so they lived in Arizona, and they drove it all the way down to Fort Collins, Colorado, where I grew up, to gift it to me. And so then we had this harp in my house, and I would kind of play it here now and then, and I loved the sound of it, but I never really got into it until a few years later. I took maybe a year of lessons on it in high school. And then I went to college and left it at my parents' house and didn't have it with me or play it for many years until I went to Cal Arts for grad school. And in my first year of Cal Arts, I was playing a ton of bansuri, the Indian bamboo flute that I play. And I started to get really bad tendonitis in my wrists. And so I could barely play for more than like 10 minutes at a time. And I was like in the middle of music school for this. And
that's scary.
Yeah, it was scary and depressing. And there was an incredible harp teacher on the faculty, Susie Allen, and I connected with her, and my dad very generously drove my harp out from Fort Collins all the way to Los Angeles. And I started taking lessons with her and started to connect back with it and play a lot more because I couldn't play flute very much. So I started to play more harp and get into it. So that was only in like 2008 or so.
That harp has had some like tender loving care being driven around the country like a little precious instrument person. It's
not an easy instrument for travel. I actually ended up a few years later getting a carbon fiber one, which is the one that I tour with. But
so you haven't been playing it that long?
I haven't been playing it for that long, and I did learn some technique on it, but I don't play like normal harp music, whatever that is, like Celtic music or classical music or orchestral music. I just kind of do my own thing. I write my own music, and if anything, I'm the most influenced by Indian music on the harp. So I call myself a raga harpist. And
the harp, though, it's not like microtonal, right? Is it in half steps?
It's in half steps, but I can tune it to whatever I want. So I can get those details if I want to. And I tend to tune it to a particular raga and use it to accompany my voice or to write music within like the scope of raga. Although I do add harmony into it as well, because you can play around with that kind of stuff on an instrument like the harp. So I do play harmony and stuff on it too. So it sort of allows me to kind of for lack of a better word, fuse the two styles. I hate that word, fusion, but
Do you ever put it through some pedals, like any delays, verbs, or distortion, anything like that?
I haven't played around too much with like distortion. I was using a delay pedal for a long time, and then I stopped recently, but I'm definitely going to try. There's a new reverb pedal out that I'm interested to try.
Yeah. Which one?
I've got to find the name of it. It's one that Clinton.
You should check out the Blue Sky. I think that would be amazing.
I actually have tried it with the Blue Sky. I don't have one, but I did try it out with that. Yeah.
I like those, and I like a lot of electro-harmonics reverbs. Theirs are a little more like vintagey, and but they have a nice musical sound, and they're cheap too.
Yeah. I installed a 3-element pickup, and so it has a direct out. So it actually sounds really beautiful, just natural.
Cool.
So I just started using that sound because sometimes, reverbs, if they're not high quality, they kind of degrade the sound.
Yeah.
But I'm still open to it. You could also look
at the Eventide. That stuff's pretty fancy.
Eventide, I have heard of that one, yeah.
Yeah. They have a really nice pedal that a lot of people use in the studios too.
Nice.
So you didn't do harp, I get it, but you thought the bansuri flute would be interesting, and that's something you have played a little longer, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so when you were listening to the track and people listened to it, like how did you, I know, because your first thing you sent was different. It was a little more like sustained notes. I think you were kind of thinking maybe you wanted to be a little more in the background.
Right.
And I was like, girl, you gotta like do your thing.
Yeah, well, I didn't want to detract from the vocal, from Ram Dass's vocal in the text. So I tend to like listen to a track and think, how can I add to this without detracting or taking away from what's going on already? So,
well, and it didn't have Trevor Hall's vocal in it either. You were just riffing off just Ram Dass, right?
Right. Yes. But then when you gave me the notes, I was like, okay, well, I'll try something else. So, yeah, I like that.
I know. I was like, oh my God. I was like, you're holding back so big. Because the second thing you sent me was like all this ridiculous technique and riffs. And I was just like, this is sick. Like I just moved them around and like, what's so cool, what I like about it, and it's not something I planned, was that the flute and Ram Dass and Trevor, and it's like those are the three sort of main melodic elements, and they take turns in a way, and then they're dancing around one another. So Ram Dass is presenting this idea of like your mind is your karma, or like your mind is this sort of gateway or filter that is holding us back from our experience, or it's the thing in between that in a way of universal consciousness, loving God. And then I almost felt like the flute with its fast little riffs was personifying thoughts. It's like the mind being, buzzing all over the place around him,
Right.
And then Trevor's singing these mantras that are almost representing the other side of it. Sort of like, here's this universal energy, and the two of them dancing around Ram Dass. I think it's so cool. This was a really interesting way that I love that when that happens, like these different elements, people doing things in different places, and then you put it together and it has a cohesiveness.
Yeah. And I appreciate that process too, of like just putting something down, what my first instinct would be, and hearing from you what you could hear. And then I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's try that direction. And then seeing kind of the final product of how you pull it all together and pull 3 or 4 different people into a cohesive thing.
So what is your process when you're actually recording for that? Do you just kind of like improvise, or do you have a process with that?
I mean, I guess a little bit. If I broke it down, I listened to it first and kind of, like I was mentioning before, I think about what I could do to add to it that won't take away or distract. And then I think about what's the mood of the piece and how can I amplify that mood. And
do you look at that in a musical way, or is it more of a feeling?
It's both. So I've studied a lot of spent many years studying Indian classical music and continue to. And the main central melodic framework for Indian music is called raga. And raga literally means passion or color, and it's described as that which colors the mind. So raga is all about mood and setting a mood and setting an atmosphere, and molding like molding the mind, really coloring the mind as its literal meaning. So when I listen to something like that, I have an ear kind of for that. So on this piece, I didn't play like a classical raga with it, although I'm very influenced by that. So it comes through, I think, in everything I do, in the way that I think about music and improvise. So
what would that mean if it was classical raga? Is that like a particular scale, or is it more of an approach?
It's more of an approach. So classical raga would have some more kind of like, it's basically melodic motifs, many different melodic motifs that evoke a mood within a scale. So basically you have a set of pitches, and sometimes the pitches will be slightly different going up or down, kind of like a melodic minor scale where it goes the 6th and 7th degree are different going up and down. So you can have that in a raga. You won't always, but you can have notes that change depending upon the direction that you're going melodically. And so you're always within those fixed pitches. So you're never going outside of those, whether it's 7 or you have a couple notes that change, 9 notes, something like that. Or it can be as little as 5. There's ragas that are 5-tone. And so that's the first thing, is that you're sticking within those notes, but not only just sticking within those notes, you're also sticking within a particular way of playing those notes and particular motifs and stuff. And so within that, there's a lot of freedom and improvisation, but it's still like, so it's not completely open. Like you might play Dorian mode and play anything you want in Dorian mode. It's sort of like you play Dorian mode with the kind of in a particular way. And that's what raga is.
How do they communicate though what that way is? Because I know you're saying that they want it to cultivate essentially a certain feeling.
Yes.
A field of energy. So it's
Correct.
Sort of like, I'm curious why these restrictions help do that. I understand the scale stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's the way. So answer your first question, how do you learn it? You learn it through a teacher and basically imitating what they do in the beginning. And then once you learn the way of moving through the notes, there's you kind of add your own perspective on it, or your own twist on it, or your own way of doing it. So, yeah. And it seems like at first glance, it seems like maybe these are sort of like rules or limitations, or maybe not that exciting, but it's a way of shaping and molding consciousness. And, wow. And you're always singing, you're always playing against a drone. You've probably heard of the tanpura or the tambura.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the kind of ubiquitous sound that you always hear in India. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm just going to turn my input level down a little bit. Sorry.
You're good.
So that is always playing in the background, and it has kind of like a little bit of a twangy sound. And what we do, so to back up, the tanpura is a 4 to 6 string instrument, and it has a big gourd resonator. And so it's played by striking each string individually in its own kind of a rhythmic pattern that doesn't have anything to do with the rhythm of the song. It just has its own kind of a mesmerizing loop that's in the way you play it. And each string, right near the bridge, you put a little tiny, another piece of string in between the bridge and the string to create that sort of twangy sound, which really opens up all the harmonics of the string. So it's kind of like
sort of like overtones.
Exactly, all the overtones.
Yeah.
So it's like you play people who play guitar and prepare it with paper, or when they prepare guitar, prepare piano. It's kind of the similar thing where you put paper or string or something in the strings to make it sound different, create a different harmonic spectrum, if you will. So anyway, that's how the tambura works. And so it creates all these. So it's very, very harmonically rich. That's what I'm trying to say in a very complicated way.
Well, just to interject, that makes a lot of sense because overtones are kind of where it's at in the sound healing world as far as the richness and the power of a tone. So like a Tibetan bowl or a gong, or obviously it's super rich in that. And every instrument has overtones, as we know, but you're saying this is a way of they're amplifying it. And that would make sense why that droniness, then you kind of making the overtones more audible.
Yes.
And on top of that, it's a drone. So it's sort of creating this sort of entrainment of the brain through the consistency of the tone. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And so then when you play, so raga was developed by ancient sound yogis, if you will, and in deep meditation and experimenting with circles of tones which come from just intonation, so the sort of natural harmonic series system,
like perfect fifths. Yeah, so like the ratios are true, so to speak.
Exactly, true ratios. Exactly. So Indian music is based on, it's called a 5-limit system, which is ratios of perfect fifths and perfect thirds. And so every note in a raga is related to each other through pure ratios. So those are the notes that I'm talking about as being your palette of what you work with.
All right, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, okay.
So you would never hear then a piano in a raga because it's almost never tuned to just intonation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a modern adaptation. You do hear you do hear equal temperament. Like, for example, things evolve and change. So, for example, the harmonium is a really good example of this. So the people think of the harmonium associated with like Krishnadas, right? That's probably the first thing that will come to someone's mind if they've never heard of it.
He's on this record too.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Yeah. So the harmonium is associated with kirtan, and kirtan comes from India. So people think the harmonium is an Indian instrument, but it's actually not. It's actually a French instrument originally, and it was taken to India during the time of colonization.
No shit.
Yeah. And the original harmoniums are foot-pumped organs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then when they got to India with the missionaries, Indians adapted it in North India to be able to sit on the floor and be able to sing like in the temples or wear it around your neck. And it came into North Indian music really strongly. However, it's equal tempered. So you have this dichotomy there, and it's also a lot of differing opinions on how good or bad that was for Indian classical music. Some people.
When was this? The 1800s?
This was, when the British first colonized India. Up until. Go ahead.
Have you read their book? I think it's called. It's like the story or the history of equal temperament or something like that. It's a little book. It's really good.
I haven't read it. No.
There's also another podcast I did with Alexander Ternus. You'd like it a lot because it's all about this.
Oh, cool.
And he's super deep into that world, maybe too deep, but it's for you and me, you'd be like, oh, this is dope. But I like, that's fascinating though, that you think about the harmonium. And that makes a lot of sense because it's a keyboard instrument. And just to give people a primer, if they're kind of a little lost on just intonation or equal temperament, it's to say that music is, there's math in the universe, right? So 0 to like a fifth represents a ratio. What is that? 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 2 to 1, whatever it is. Do you know?
Yeah, I think it's 2 to 1. No?
It's 2 to 1. Let's say it's 2 to 1. Let's just say for argument's sake, that's good math. So it's like 1, double, twice that is 2. So that's a perfect, nice, think of it like a nice triangle or a square, a nice perfect shape. And when they did a piano, So those just exist. Those ratios just exist. It's just math. And when we sing, if you were to sing a note and I sing the fifth, and maybe our brains would naturally just make it the right ratio, and that would be called just intonation.
Yeah.
Whereas a piano, they wanted to develop an instrument that could play in all the different keys, all 12 keys, like C, D, E, and so forth. In order to do that and fit it onto a piano, they had to tweak these ratios a bit, make them smaller and larger so that it would all fit on one piano. And so it was sort of a advance in the technology in a way. But in order to do that, the fifths became, I believe, a little shorter. Like it's not quite all the way there. And the thirds also.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is we're so used to hearing this in our Western ear, because most music is now that's called equal temperament. That sounds normal to us.
Yeah.
And when you hear just intonation, for some people, it sounds out of tune, which is a crazy thing to think. But so like the human voice or instruments like string instruments where your finger, where you put it on the fret determines the pitch, they can more easily play around with just intonation because they can just do it by how you sing or how you play the instrument. But a piano, when I hit a key, I can't change its pitch. So I don't have the ability, like when I play piano, to change into just intonation without retuning the whole piano, and then it would only work in one key, I think. So that's my little background. You're welcome to add to that if I missed anything or got it wrong.
That was good.
We were talking about your back to the harmonium.
Oh, to the harmonium. Anyway, so so the harmonium entered into Indian classical music, even though it's not just intonation, but it's an accompaniment instrument, and it's never usually the main focus. It's usually supporting the vocal, and the vocal is still doing its own microtonal, quote unquote microtonal, justly intoned notes. But so it's an interesting thing that happened. And I in my music tend to move through both systems. So I study vocal, and in my classical vocal singing, always sing against a drone and try to really sink into the pure intervals. But when I play harmonium or harp, I also introduce Western harmony into it. And so then I tend to kind of move more with equal temperament. But when I'm singing, I'll still sing the just notes, but I'll use equal temperament as a way to accompany, but I won't always play like the third, for example. I'll sing the third.
But when you're playing the harp and the harmonium, you don't have the option, right?
You don't have the option. I mean, the harp I do, and I do keep one of my harps, my wooden harp. I do more like experiments with tuning in it and keep it more like in one key and stuff like that. And then my other harp, I keep it more equal temperament. So I play around with both because there's pros and cons of each system. You know what I mean?
Well, there's another way to, another aspect of this is what we're tuning to. For instance, right now, A being 440 as the standard. And that's another interesting point because, there is no A, right? There's infinite spectrum of sound in a universe.
Yeah.
From things we can't hear to things up high and super low. Our ears can just hear from like 20 hertz to about 20,000 kilohertz. And us saying that A is 440 is our decision, but throughout history that has shifted, and even to this day, some European orchestras tune around 443, 444, and some rock artists like Jimi Hendrix, some Beatles experimented with this. They tuned to lower tunings as a way of sort of getting outside the box.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And so this whole argument as like 528, this sort of stuff people get into, I think what they're not understanding is that there is no fundamental tuning. And maybe it's just like this intuitive desire to get out of like a certain standardized system, just be like, I just want to tune my guitar down or up or whatever. But the real thing to me is what you're talking about, just intonation versus equal. Like if you're singing true ratios, that's quite obvious. It just is or it isn't.
Correct.
Regardless of what the A is tuned to.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I think. Do you tune a 440?
I tune my keyboard when I play live up. Actually,
you tune it up.
I tune it. It's 12 cents sharp. Yeah,
you go the
and
other
I do
way.
that
Then the
to get closer.
Right now.
Well, because I'd have to tune it down like almost a half step, which sounds terrible.
Yeah.
When you start bending pitches that much, it's not that great.
Right.
But a little bit is fine. It's good enough for rock and roll. And it's like that way, like if I want to pull out like a harmonic or something, yes, they're not actually totally in tune, but that's actually okay and kind of interesting. And I've been doing that for years. Most of my stuff is, except like this record, a lot of it's not, because I was playing with so many other people and instruments that it'd be way too complex. String players hate me when I'm like, oh, this is 12 cents sharp. They're like, that's the worst thing I've ever heard. My instrument sounds terrible. Right. I'm sorry. Sorry that
and thank you for doing that, because like my bansuris, I don't have flexibility. I can change the pitch a little bit with my embouchure.
Oh, yeah. See, there you go.
Yeah, I have my bansuris made in 440 because I normally play with people in 440. But harmoniums are the same way. Actually, harmoniums are generally shipped from India at like 443 or 444.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the reeds in there, like over time, like I have a melodica that's made of wood, and I had to tune it because it goes out. All the keys are going up and down and stuff. And
right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would have probably been a bit frustrated too if it had been 12 cents sharp.
You'd just be sitting there trying to purse your lips and get it up a little bit. You're like, what the hell?
I think also too, it's a matter of like what sits the best for a particular instrument. Like for Indian instruments, 440 is more like a recent standard. And so the sitar, for example, oftentimes sitar players will play somewhere in between C sharp and D, or somewhere in between C and C sharp, because that's where the string tension is the best for the way that their instrument is made, because the instruments aren't made, you know what I mean, like to a specific standard.
Well, if it's just them, a singer, and a tabla player, they can pull that off because they all can adjust, right?
Yeah.
You throw a piano into the mix or whatever, things that are like, dude, I can't change. You're going to have to succumb to me. I mean, a lot of Equal Temperament was because they're succumbing to the piano.
Right.
Once that became like an orchestral instrument, they had to. Interesting. So that was a long tangent, but so you were playing the bansuri on this song and you were just sort of improvising, but I asked you how you came up with the phrasing. You're saying it was sort of part intuitive, part your process was looking like riffing off a raga, but not being too beholden to it.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good way of describing it.
Okay. And so so you were just like throwing a bunch of phrases down in that style, just kind of, for you, is it about getting into a state for yourself, or is it about the opposite? Like just don't even think about it, just kind of riff, or what's your recording process like?
I would say, there's no particular thing I do beforehand when I record. Like it would probably be good if I meditated or something, but normally
maybe not because for me it's like I'm putting too much pressure. When we had Lorraine in the studio, she plays saxophone on a couple tracks, and she's she came all the way in, all this stuff, we're about to hit record, and she's like, well, shouldn't we do this or that? And I was like, we should definitely not. Let's just go. Let's just start making music. Just make some noise. Don't even think about it. It's casual.
Yeah. I think that's how I am too, because once I start playing, that puts me in the frame of mind, totally. And listening to what's there already and trying to kind of gel with what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And is that, you're making your own music too, or is it mostly a combination of that and playing on other records and with?
You mean in terms of recording, or just in what I'm doing in general?
Yeah, well, your own process as an artist.
Yeah, right now, and what I've been doing the last few years, I guess, is really focusing on singing and studying with my Indian vocal teacher. And I want to become a better singer. That's been my main focus for quite a while, as well as what I was talking about with the harp and what I call like raga harp, or that kind of thing. So being able to accompany my voice using the harp and experimenting with different techniques of doing that, and the flute too. But I do spend a lot of time practicing just traditional, classical music, Indian classical music and raga. And then from there, generally I'll get inspirations to write a new piece or like a project or collaboration that I want to do. But for the last few years anyway, it's been definitely rooted in that in my personal practice.
Is your personal practice like rooted in preparation for events, or is it more like, I don't know, is there a particular, what does it mean to you to shed and practice?
Oh, wow. That's changed a lot over the years. Mm-hmm. I think for a long time for me, I had to have a gig or a show in order to be motivated.
Yeah.
I'm
I vibe that.
Working a lot on my discipline and my inner motivation. I have in my life mostly been externally motivated in terms of like, you know, a teacher expecting certain things of me or a gig that I need to prepare for. So as I get older, though, I'm starting to understand the value of setting that for myself and so on. So it's a work in progress.
What is that value, though? Is it like for you when you're practicing like the voice with classical Indian music? Is it about how you feel afterwards, or is it more like devotional?
It's
or
both.
Is it just more like I just want to be a better musician?
I think it's I would say it's all three. I would say that it's beginning to see that like I am just so much happier every day that I sing, and it totally shifts my mood and my whole day goes better. I feel so much better. And then when I have people over to play with me or record, I'm just like ready and my chops are like in good shape and everything is just going better. And also life just goes better. You know, like I feel like when I am spending time, you know, in the energy of that, then that tends to flow more towards me in my life. Then opportunities tend to flow a bit more smoothly towards me when I'm spending more of my time doing that. Yeah,
something about tapping into the creative process is magical about how it helps you and your brain and your life. It's what makes you unique as a human.
Right.
Being able to do that. And so when you exercise that part of your abilities, especially when you're mastering something, it really unlocks something for the soul. The soul is singing and it's just happy.
It's just happy. And it's also like, I think without having it be a routine and a daily thing, then how, like that's, for me, that's the only way those magical moments come through of like an original piece. Is when I'm regularly sitting down and getting into that space. So yeah, I mean, and it's also, for me, it's also correlated with my move to Boulder.
Well, didn't you say you grew up there?
I did. I grew up in Fort Collins, which is nearby, but I spent the last 15 years living in California. And the last almost
in LA. Yeah, you were in LA, right?
I was 5 years in the Bay Area. Right from when I was 18, so 18 to whatever, 23 or something, I was in the Bay Area. And then I moved to LA when I went to grad school at Cal Arts and just stayed there until a couple of years ago. So I was there for almost 10 years in LA. And, you know, it's like, I think about my time in LA. It's like I graduated. I was in 2009. I was like in my mid 20s with a Master of Fine Arts degree in world music performance with an emphasis in North Indian music.
I got one of those. You know what I call those? I call them motherfucking arts degree.
Exactly. It's like
MFA, baby.
And it's like, what do you do? Like I graduated and it's crazy. It's like, how do you find your way with a degree like that when you don't know anything about business and you don't know anything about how to manage yourself or your gigs or your discipline or, you know, any of that stuff. And so it took a long time, you know, like 8 years or something in LA. And, so I think it makes sense being in LA that I would have been motivated by, you know, gigs and this and that and all the kind of external stuff that I had to do to kind of get my career off the ground.
Totally.
You know, and so since being in Boulder, it's been nice because it's just so much quieter and calmer and I have so much more inner space to spend on practice.
Well, I told Trev Hall that you guys are in the same town.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Like, when we were doing his talk about this, and
nice.
It's a great place you are because I'm sure a lot shifted for you when you moved from Los Angeles to there. And didn't you say you're also now heading up Nosara or what? Not Nosara. What is it?
I just started teaching at Naropa. That's my Naropa University. That might be what you're thinking about. Yeah. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So, I mean, that's a shift too.
Yes, it is. We just had my first class this past week. It's definitely a shift. It's great. It's really fun. It's kind of environment that I think this is just perfect for.
Yeah.
At that school. So, yeah.
Well, it's great that they have someone with your background and that it's sort of you're younger and kind of coming at it from a practical perspective and kind of combining modern elements with the old elements because that's where we're at in the world, right? You know, that seems very relevant.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think so. I think so.
What are you specifically teaching there? What is the program?
So it's a program called Indian Devotional and Raga Singing. And it was started many years ago by so when I was growing up in Fort Collins and when I was around 12 years old, I started studying the bansuri, the flute. And my mom found me a teacher in Boulder named Chaitanya Kabir. And so I studied with him between the ages of 12 and 18, and he lived in Boulder. So he was my first bansuri and raga teacher. And he started the Naropa program.
When?
I actually
like a while ago.
A long time ago. I don't know the date, but it's been probably a decade at least, I would say. Yeah. And so he also started to have monthly kirtans at Naropa. But these kirtans are not like any sort of Western kirtan that people may have attended. They are, what's really beautiful about Kabir is that he brings together raga, which comes from Indian classical music, and kirtan, which is a folk form of devotional call and response singing. So it might seem natural that those would go together, but they're not traditionally taught together. But he did. He taught them together, and that was how I grew up learning. And so for me, that was totally natural. So I love what he started here because it goes to the roots of raga and of all these things we're talking about, resonance and just intonation. And, you know, the first thing that we are going to teach our students is we're going to bring in 5 or 6 tamburas and teach everyone how to play tambura and how to tune tambura and how to sing just a unison note with the tambura and how to feel what it feels like, hopefully to feel like it's in tune and really listen deeply to the harmonics and stuff like that. So it's kind of like starting just from that basis of being able to hear the overtones and sing just intoned intervals. Then build raga on top of that, and then kirtan and mantra as well with that. So I find when kirtan is sort of empowered with raga and empowered with that whole kind of field, which comes from Nada Yoga, the yoga of sound, and kind of with that approach and perspective, it just becomes so much more expansive. So anyway, so this program is very unique in that respect that Kabir and I both feel, and I learned from Kabir this way, but we both feel very passionate about raga and about intonation. And
is the program geared towards performance, like for musicians, or is it more geared towards anyone?
It's geared towards anyone. So right now I'm teaching a level 1, and our level 1 has, we have 24 students from all departments. Mostly, a lot of students are from the yoga studies department at Naropa. And Naropa has just started a master's degree too in yoga studies, but most of them are yoga studies.
Is it an MFA?
No, it's an MA. And we have psychology students. We have a handful of music majors, but it's actually.
Do you know what would be interesting is cross-pollinating that with psychology and psychotherapy.
Yes.
Social work, singing as well. It's sort of like art therapy, I guess.
Yes, totally. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. And of course, Naropa has, famous somatic psychology program too. So we have psychology students, a few music majors, but then next semester, I'm going to teach a level 2 that's going to be offered for the first time at Naropa along with the level 1. So for that, I'm going to be recruiting like musicians and music majors to just jump right into level 2. Because level 1 right now is accessible for all. You don't have to have any singing experience to be in level 1. So anyway.
I'd be interested to see like how that could also integrate into psychedelic studies.
Right.
Like singing.
Yeah.
Because singing's so therapeutic.
Yes.
And there's a saying I've heard about when people are having a difficult trip. It's like, have them sing a song because it regulates their breath. It puts their mind on something, and then their vibration. It feels really good. It can just shift their whole state of being. And then you add on all this stuff about, well, what if it's like, these really cool fifths and they're feeling it, and or they've got this drone going. I mean, that could be incredible for people.
It could, yeah. I believe Boulder
really open things.
I believe Boulder is one of the places where they're starting psilocybin studies with what is it, PTSD? I can't remember exactly.
Really?
I can't believe which psychedelic it is, but I'm pretty sure it's.
Well, there's stuff going on with MAPS and MDMA that's been going on for a long time. And they're really close to finishing their clinical trials with PTSD.
Okay, maybe it's MDMA. I gotta look it up. That's bad. I should know which drug it is.
Well, that's of course, there's no need for you to know this, but I know that's happening all over through MAPS, and that's great. And the psilocybin stuff is a little further back. It's more. They're just starting to see how it affects things like depression and cluster headaches. But I wouldn't be surprised if it has profound effects on. But they're not even in a phase 1 trial.
Oh, okay. No, you're right. It is MAPS. So. I just didn't remember my drug correctly.
You're mixing your drugs.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. It sounds like a really, really cool program. And this is not remote. People are there.
People are here. Yeah. I hope, my hope is to develop it into a minor. But right now it's just a few courses. So.
And how do you differentiate mantra from kirtan? Because you said mantra, kirtan, and raga as if like there's 3 separate things. Yeah,
that's a really good question. That's a great question. So kirtan is, as I mentioned, it's a folk form of music, and it uses some mantras, like some more well-known mantras, like for example, Om Namah Shivaya, or the Maha Mantra, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, right? But it also uses lyrics that aren't mantra. So it can use bits of devotional poetry or the names of deities, or there's also kirtan, which is to the formless aspect of the divine. So we think of kirtan as like you're singing to Krishna, you're singing to Kali, or, but there's also kirtan, which is to the formless aspect of the divine.
Like Ram?
Ram is still a form, right? Ram is still, he's a deity, he was a king, he was a historical figure, but I'm talking about kirtan that is like talking about, for example, the essence of Om. So Om is not form. It's not a deity. It just is.
It's a vibration.
It just is, right? Or talking about the nature of the mind, or things like this. It's formless. So, but anyway, digressing a little bit from your question. So kirtan can have all of those different things, and kirtan can have Sanskrit in it or any other language. So can have the vernacular of any language, Hindi, Gujarati, Marathi, there's tons of Indian languages. And it's not necessarily grammatical Sanskrit. Now, mantra, on the other hand, comes from mantra yoga, which is a lot more exacting in the way that it's pronounced, and in its grammar, and its form. So I would say, so mantra is like, it's like a classical science, and kirtan is like a folk devotional type of.
But they use mantra in kirtan,
but
right?
you can also use mantra in a looser, like the way we use mantra in the English language is like anything that's repeated over and over again. So if you look at mantra
would that be way, like TM meditation? Is that
transcendental meditation uses mantra? Yeah.
It's a mantra meditation.
It's a mantra meditation. Right? Yeah. We're using very simple mantras. So kirtan is like mantra and melody and song, but it's not always using mantra. Sometimes the words that it uses aren't mantra. Does that make sense?
It sounds to me like we're looking down on kirtan a little bit. We're like, this is for the folk people. They don't know what they're up to. I'm just playing it. Yeah, it makes sense. You're saying, well, kirtan's sort of mashing things up a little bit and adding in other elements, and it's but mantra precedes it, I would presume.
Yeah. I mean, mantra, like if we're looking at the classical view, mantra is like a classical type of thing that uses like proper pronunciation and proper guidelines and everything, and kirtan is folk. I think that's a good way of saying it.
Would you say those are sort of the three, though, major pillars of Indian classical music?
The three main pillars. I would say, so so mantra is not so much, mantra and kirtan are not considered Indian classical music. So the pillars of Indian classical music would be raga and tala. So raga is what we talked about before, being the melodic framework that's sung over a drone, using pure intervals, and tala means rhythm.
Oh,
yeah. So tala it means rhythm. It also means like cycle of time. So like something being in 4 beats or 7 beats or 9 beats or 12 or 16, or that's called the tala of a song. So I would say those are the pillars, is raga and tala, and then also rasa. So rasa is it literally means like essence or juice, but rasa refers to what we were talking about with mood. So the mood of a raga, or the mood that the performer is intending or working to instill in the audience. So I would.
That seems a little harder to teach and talk about.
It is. It's not.
It's more figurative.
It is. Yeah. It's just it's taught through just doing and experiencing.
It's the formless in a way.
Mm-hmm. So I would say those are the pillars: raga, tala, and rasa. Hope I'm not forgetting one, but.
Have you ever heard the Brooklyn Raga Association?
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. Yeah, I've played up at their events a couple of times.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
I'm a huge fan and follower of Brooklyn Raga Massive.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah, they did a Terry Riley thing, which I thought was like, how does that work? But they did it. They did a bunch of Terry Riley music.
Well, Terry Riley. So there's a cohort of contemporary composers, including Terry Riley, who I actually also studied with when I was at Mills in Oakland. Terry Riley and there's another one, Art Landy, who's here in Boulder, and there's a handful of composers who studied with an Indian vocalist, Pandit Pranath. So,
but when I listen to that Brooklyn Raga stuff, I don't think there's any vocals, are there? It's all instrumental.
but that's fine. Instruments. I mean, so Terry Riley wrote and was heavily influenced by raga, and he actually sometimes performs raga too. Yeah. However, he's a contemporary composer, so he's like doing all kinds of stuff, but it's definitely informed and influenced by that heavily. And when I studied with him too, I could tell in his teaching and in his whole being, like it's there, that influence is very much there. So I love so much what Brooklyn Raga Massive is doing, because they are really like doing all kinds of contemporary stuff and cross-cultural explorations. And, they did a John Coltrane Raga tribute. So they're looking at like Western musicians who have been deeply influenced by Raga and playing their music. And that's just like with Indian classical musicians and instruments. So that just is so awesome. It's really exciting.
Do you think it's feasible to get into Raga through piano or keyboard instruments?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can learn it on even an equal tempered instrument and still benefit greatly from its approach, even though you might not necessarily be playing the pure intervals. I think that the approach of raga and the way of thinking about melody and the beautiful combinations of notes and color palettes that you get, like we have in Western music, we have like 12 modes. We have the Greek modes, and we have like whole tone scales and diminished scales and half diminished scales, but it comes nowhere near the number of ragas that are in existence. So you get purely from just like wanting to increase, like someone wanting to increase their like musical palette of what they have available to them when they play. It's like studying raga will open that up a lot.
So they're essentially like lots of different specific scales.
Yes.
Like, hey, use these
Correct.
notes. And aside from that, you're saying then it's like, you said there's a vibe you're trying to go for. And is there a rhythm, or is it mostly the vibe sort of speaks to that?
The second pillar, but not second in order of importance, of course, which is thala, which is the rhythmic component. So the rhythmic component too is, I think, one of the most amazing ways to study rhythm, because you learn how to improvise in cycles of time that we're not taught in the West. You know, so it opens up like,
you're like not 4/4,
exactly,
kind of different types of polyrhythmic stuff.
And there's so many ways like of conceiving like a 7 cycle, and the way that Indian music breaks that down is really cool, because it makes it really simple, and like you can go step by step and learn how to play in 7 so that it becomes really natural.
Oh, I only have one song in 7/4. It's a song called Fresh Start.
Nice.
That nice. I was just heard that the other day, and I was like, all right, that's in a 7. I like that. It's a little different.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. And what kind of stuff are you jamming on? Like, what do you like to listen to? Or is it totally diverse?
Yeah, it's totally diverse. I listen to obviously quite a bit of Indian classical music. I also, let me just think about this. There's some musicians out of New York that I've been listening to a lot lately. There's a singer called Somi, who is a jazz singer, and I forget exactly where she's from, but she's Ugandan. I'm not completely sure, but she's just incredible, beautiful singer, and she incorporates a lot of African rhythms in her music, and African languages and folk songs and stuff like that. It's beautiful. And there's another. Actually, he's part of Brooklyn Raga Massive. His name is Max ZT. He plays hammered dulcimer and has a band called House of Waters, which I love. It's hammered dulcimer, but he studied Indian classical music. So it's Indian hammered dulcimer and bass and percussion. It's beautiful, like the harmonic movement that he creates with his
cool. I'll check it out.
Yeah.
What's your guilty pleasure kitchen music? In the car, like, oh, I'm just going to throw this on.
My guilty pleasure.
Not that it's bad. It's just sort of like, it's like for me, that might be, I have lots, but it's like Sunday morning, like Motown.
Right.
Or, I mean, how can you go wrong? Or I like a lot of electronic music. Mm-hmm. Sometimes there's some really, modern stuff that's just amazing. So fun. Not like EDM, but like, Kiasmos is definitely my favorite. I don't know if you know them, but
I would say, let's see. I was recently listening to the Tune Yards really loud.
Oh, well, she's good.
It's awesome stuff. I guess it's not so much a guilty pleasure, but it's not a guilty pleasure. Stevie Wonder.
She said, like, I heard some interview, like her, when she was making that project, she's like, I just want the music to be kind of weird. Like that was like her like ethos. No, not weird enough. It needs to be a little weird. Right. So a lot of quick corners and strange, rhythms, which is it's really interesting stuff.
Totally. But yeah, I mean, just like you, any kind of like funk and Motown and like any of that stuff I'm putting on for sure regularly.
Awesome. Well, this song Mind Karma, when this comes out, is out. So I hope people hear it. And you're the one, Sheela Bringi, playing the bansuri flute. And where can people find you online?
My website is shebrings.com. So she, Brings, shebrings.com, on Facebook, Sheela Bringi, Instagram. I'm on YouTube also.
Right on. Cool. Well, thanks for giving us some insight and letting me pepper you with questions.
My pleasure.
Maybe we'll do it again sometime and get deep into. Still have more music.
Cool, that'd be fun.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, there it is. Thank you to Sheela Bringi for gracing us with your time. I can't wait to get into these subjects even deeper, and I'm sure we'll have her back to talk about it more. When I'm done talking here, I will play for you the track Mind Karma so you can hear Sheela and her wonderful bansuri flute work. And if you want to check out the whole album or this track in high definition fidelity audio, you can do that wherever you listen to music, as well as eastforest.org, where you can see it in lossless wave format, if that's your music nerd kind of thing. Thank you for reviewing this podcast. Giving it 5 stars and a written review means a lot, and it really helps to get this thing out there and for people to take a chance on listening to it. And I really appreciate that little gift you give me to help this thing keep on moving. But you can always reach out directly just to say hi or thanks or just any comments or questions at info@eastforest.org. That's your main portal for information. And I just hope you keep enjoying the new material. Ram Dass Chapter 2 comes out March 22nd. But for now, keep telling us your stories there online on social media, and we'll keep this movement and this story happening together. Because that's what it is. It's something we're doing together, pushing forth a new story, being vulnerable together, and seeing what happens. So thanks so much. Keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But when you do, if you do it with grace, folks. May the forest be with you.
Our karma is our mind. And the mind stands in the way of a clear view of God. Our minds give us clouded perceptions. This incarnation has in it individuality. Individualism leads to war and anger and insecurity and fear. Our karma is our mind. Our karma is our mind. The mind stands in the way of a clear view of God. Our minds give us clouded perceptions.